a good time, Joel. In the privacy of your own home. Just take those old records off the shelf. That's her. She's fantastic. Yeah. I said listen to them by myself.
Did you have a good time last night?
I had a great time.
Today's music ain't got the same soul. You ever get high, Joe?
Don't let me do anything stupid. Don't worry.
I like that old time rock and roll.
Man, that trailer gave a lot away from the movie, I feel like.
Yeah, it did. It was like the entire plot almost.
Yeah.
Like every good scene.
Jeez. Hey, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about the 1983 film Risky Business starring Tom Cruise.
Baby Tom Cruise.
Baby Tom Cruise. Speaking of baby, they he was just in the middle of filming The Outsiders for this movie. He's just about finishing that movie up. And so he was greaser, fucking jacked and stuff. And he came in for the audition. They're like, this guy's not right for this, Chicago suburbs hoity-toity type kid. And so they ended up making him lose weight and then had him eat a lot of fatty food. So his face looked fat and baby-like, which you can tell. His cheeks are kind of puffy in the movie. It's really funny.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. So I've seen this movie before, but it was only recent that I watched it for the first time, maybe about a year or two ago. So this is my second time watching it.
Yeah, this was my first. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, obviously it's kind of a more classic 80s movie.
Yeah.
I think it's regarded pretty universally as a great movie.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if I was going to be interested in it because I actually had no idea what it was about. I just knew the Bob Seger dancing scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously that scene's iconic. I went into it the same way when I first watched it about a year or two ago. I was I don't know if I'm going to like this, and I don't know really what it's about. And, I like Tom Cruise. I know a lot of people sometimes don't like him just because of his Scientology background, but I've always I don't know the guy personally, obviously, but I think he's an awesome actor. He's one of the last remaining movie stars in the business. And I think he does an awesome job in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. His acting was good. Pretty much everybody in the movie is really good. The parents are kind of stale, but I think they're supposed to be. So,
yeah,
it's fine. But yeah, it's kind of funny because plot spoilers coming up, but it reminds me a lot of the plot of Night Shift, which we talked about a few episodes ago, where the main character kind of accidentally stumbles into sex work or managing sex work, I guess is the better way to describe
Two very
it.
different things. Two very different things. Yeah.
But this is more Risky Business to me is more like Home Alone if he accidentally turned into a pimp.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of cool things to dissect with this movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a great plot. It's very enjoyable. It made a movie star out of Tom Cruise. It flew by for me. I enjoyed it again on my second viewing. I watched it on Paramount Plus, so you can stream it on there if you've got it. Yeah, I mean, really, really good movie. It made a lot of money at the box office at the time. It was only made for $6.2 million, made over $63 million, so it was a good box office success. And I think it's a classic 80s movie, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's really cool because it takes place in what is it, Glencoe, Illinois, which is a pretty affluent suburb of Chicago, and we grew up relatively near there. Obviously, not in Glencoe, excuse me, but it's a very nice suburb. So it definitely rings true to home, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny to see again, kind of the hoity-toity, white, affluent suburb. White parents, white privilege kind of thing, but it portrays the suburbs really well, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the 80s does a lot to the like suburb setting is they try and crap on it a lot, I guess. And like this movie does a good job of balancing the setting of the suburbs with the like seedy things that are kind of going on, but they're mostly taking place in Chicago, not really in the suburb until he opens his house as a sex den. But
yeah, it's very almost John Hughes-esque with its suburb setting of, this is Illinois. Like, even the parents remind me of Ferris Bueller's parents.
Yeah, there's a lot of Ferris Bueller type elements to this movie, especially the car, which I'm sure we'll get to.
100%. We're definitely getting to that. And Ferris Bueller came out after this. So, yeah, this was a trendsetter for sure. Especially, speaking of trend setting, another movie that really popularized Ray-Bans, the sunglasses.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, obviously, we talked about the Blues Brothers. That's a movie that popularized it. And this movie, for sure, made him even more mainstream, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still iconic to this day.
Yeah, and I would argue that this movie probably did more for it. Because
Absolutely.
They make Cruise look so cool, like when he's wearing them, and like that whole like salesman like montage where he's wearing them is like so well done and so much fun.
Yeah, and then when he puts them on when he's getting like interviewed by the Princeton like admissions guy, which is cool. Like, I mean, that's an iconic scene. A lot of iconic scenes. Another 80s cool point to this movie is Tangerine Dream did the soundtrack, and the soundtrack's pretty awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good soundtrack.
Yeah, pink and purple font as it's opening up for the credits and everything. That's very 80s. I love the whole opening of like the POV of his parents lecturing him, like what he can and can't do. Like, oh, like, here are the ground rules. You can't have a house party, and obviously you're like, well, he's gonna do it.
Yeah. Well, like the funniest thing about the opening is when the dad's like, "Come with me." He walks into their like living room and he opens up his like hi-fi system. He's like, "Do you hear that? It's excessive bass." Like,
yeah, I love that part.
It's the most uptight thing somebody could say.
Yeah,
it's pretty great.
Suburb parents, like, this is the holy grail of, don't touch my sound system. I love the whole, it's got that message of like, sometimes you just got to say what the fuck. And that's kind of an underlying theme throughout the entire movie of him just being like, him being uptight and like always following the rules. Again, white suburban, kid that's got great grades and a perfect track record and wants to go to, a prestigious school. And he's kind of sick of following the rules. And his buddy's like, sometimes you just got to say what the fuck and go with the flow and, just do it.
Yeah. I think, that's the rough plot of a lot of these like teenage coming of age movies in the 80s is the like school's overrated, like don't take yourself too seriously, like that kind of stuff, So like in that respect, I would imagine this is also a trendsetter because it came out so early in the decade. But yeah, I mean it's a very very blatant coming of age movie in a lot of ways. And like yeah, it really explores the idea of him like letting loose and like trying to escape from his like very constrained life.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of coming of age stories. Those are like, I always really enjoy them. And this movie is very coming of age, like you're saying. I don't know, the whole question of like, you're about to graduate high school, where are you going to go to college? Like, what are you going to do with your life? What do you want to do? That's like, you know, very apparent in this movie. And I love those because it's very realistic. It's something very relatable. So it's a good plot. It's easy to follow and it's entertaining. And I love that.
Yeah. And like, you know, probably one of the big like an inception points of that plot is, The Graduate. I think there's a lot of that in this movie as well. Mm-hmm. Though in The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman is just apathetic. Where like in this, Tom Cruise is much more high strung and like, I need to get into Princeton. I have to go to college. I have to like do all these things, you know?
Yeah.
Like I have to follow the rules. But it's the same kind of story of like trying to figure out what the hell you're doing, you know, when you're 18,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's also about like the American dream and capitalism. Like there's the scene where he's at that restaurant with all his friends. And I love the scene where they're just all talking about money and like, oh, like, you know, a doctor makes this much money out of college, or, you know, an engineer makes this much money out of college. And like everyone like thinks they've got it all figured out and know what they want to do. And it's like, all right, well, it's just literally like, let's go to school to get a good job to make a ton of money. And that's how like your success is. Again, the American dream. And, you know, it's very, very apparent. That like theme is very apparent in this movie.
Yeah. And what I think is awesome about that scene in particular is they're all listing off all these jobs and their salaries. And Tom Cruise goes, wait, don't any of you want to like make a mark on the world and like do something spectacular? And they're all looking at him like really confused, and he just like cracks a smile. Like,
yeah,
you know, like he's full of shit.
Yeah.
But like, it kind of speaks to his character early on in the movie that like he's also in that camp of like, you have to do it by the book. You got to follow all these different, you know, steps and life stages and all that crap, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So then, you know, obviously it's funny how they kind of get into the whole prostitute thing. It's, you know, it's very teenage, like, you know, the classic guy wants to get laid story. And, you know, they call a prostitute and it ends up being a you know, transvestite, a guy in you know, drag, which is pretty funny, a pretty funny scene. And then they're like, oh, you need Lena. And, you know, she comes over. That whole scene where she comes over and they're just like, you know, the door opens, the wind is flowing, and like, it's just so over the top and hilarious.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's one of those scenes where like, it's almost like a dream sequence.
Yeah.
Like, and it's, I mean, you find out that she actually did spend the night with him, but like, it almost could have all been a dream. Like,
yeah. Yeah. Agreed. It's just good filmmaking. Kind of going back a little bit, just the whole Joel dancing in his underwear obviously is iconic. He actually improvised that, which is really cool. So, I mean, that's, you know, everyone knows Risky Business, like you were saying, like you've known that scene, and, you know, Bob Seger, like everyone knows that scene regardless if they've seen the movie or not.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Yeah. Then they, you know, he gets into the prostitution kind of thing, and Lena, she steals the egg, his mom's precious egg, which is hilarious.
Just like this, like wad of crystal. It's not even that cool.
Yeah. And that kind of, starts the story of like, all right, I got to go after this girl and get it back. And it's exciting. It's like, what the hell is he going to do? Like the whole movie, you're like, how the hell is he going to get out of these situations in a sense?
Right. Yet, and they keep getting worse and worse.
Yeah. And what's cool is he kind of embraces the, you just got to say what the fuck. So he just kind of goes with the flow, which is cool character development for the movie, for sure. And for his character.
Yeah. And so I think it's essential to his character development in the movie that like every problem ends in failure and like forces him to just say like, all right, I can't deal with that anymore. Like I need to start focusing on something else, or like, screw it, sunk cost, let's move forward, like,
yeah.
There's not like, he doesn't cling to some of the problems that end up that he's like faced with, where he would have earlier in the movie.
Yeah. And it's like, college is his answer to all the problems. It sounds like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of how it's almost phrased in the movie.
Yeah.
Like at one point there's a line from Lena she says, "You're the one that's going to college. You figure it out." Like,
yeah. Yeah.
The whole future enterpriser,
Yes. Yeah.
Thing
that is
in high school.
Fantastic. That's like, they only really address it. I mean, it ends up tying into the plot really well, which I do want to talk about the writing in this movie because it's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Again, like they weave a lot of these things into different points of the movie that they could have just left like irrelevant, but they tied things together in such like a creative and fun way. The Future Enterprisers is like the best one because early on they talk about this club that they're in, which is basically like a business club, I guess. And like they have to come up with some kind of product to sell in like some fake market or whatever. And like, they're very into it and they're very worried about being the best, business in the class or whatever. And by the end of it, we like don't hear about it for a long time in the movie. And then all of a sudden it comes back and he's like, tying back in the Future Enterprisers, he kind of uses that as the platform to start this prostitution business.
Yeah.
And he he kind of embraces this like persona of a future enterpriser, and that's when he starts wearing his Ray-Bans with like his like suit
sport
jacket with the sleeves rolled up, and he's like pitching to all his buddies like, hey, I can get you laid, and like how much does it cost you to take a girl on 3 dates and you get nothing, like it's a awesome montage of him just like selling to people, and then it kind of culminates in the interview with the Princeton admissions officer or whatever, and like the admissions guy shows up in the middle of this like sex party, and then he's talking to him in their like den, I guess, and like the interview just doesn't go well at all, and the guy's like giving him some like bad feedback, and like my favorite line in the whole movie probably is Tom Cruise just puts his Ray-Bans on. He's like, well, I guess I'm going to U of I.
Yeah, which U of I is a good school.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just a funny, like, because that's probably the moment where he embraces the fuck it attitude completely. Yeah. And he's like, all right, like we're all in.
Yeah. So, the whole reason he kind of gets into this prostitution ring is because he he's taking out his dad's Porsche, 928 Porsche, which is awesome. It's a V8.
So cool.
Yeah, and like apparently they recorded one without like a muffler, so it sounded super awesome, which it sounded awesome in the movie. I'm a big Porsche fan, you're a Porsche fan, like I'm a big car guy, and you know, the whole classic line of Joel just going, you know, Tom Cruise's character going, Porsche, there is no substitute. Like that is so cool, and it's just like, it's just so awesome. I love that. So they basically are, you know, going out for ice cream, and Tom Cruise is high with the prostitute Lena, and the car goes into Lake Michigan, and submerges in water, and that inciting incident is like, okay, well, I need to pay for this before my parents get back from vacation, and that's why I'm going to go into this prostitution ring. So he's kind of pushed into it, and, you know, the reluctant character, the reluctant hero. And it's, you know, that's a kind of a classic storyline of like the hero's journey of like, you know, the main character is reluctant to do this, and then he gets thrust into this situation and ends up succeeding and saving the day, if you will. Right. Which is him fixing the Porsche.
Yeah. And like, you know, this kind of, his like struggle to succeed, like it's almost like even though he is like a high achieving student, he's in this club, he's on track to Princeton, he's like not really succeeding. It like based on the way that he acts and like his people around him act, you know, and like that's why like at the end he pulls everything together, he gets the car fixed, he gets his house like perfectly clean, back to exactly the way it was before all this shenanigans happened. And like that's like the element of success. Even he does end up getting into Princeton. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it's because probably like the prostitutes, you know, one of the prostitutes slept with him, with the Princeton guy.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like alluded to a little bit in the movie, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But the whole, like, you know, the Guido the pimp, Joe Pantoliano, who's got a horrible nose in it. This is like pre nose job. he which awesome actor. Love him as Ralphie in Sopranos. Guido the pimp, he's awesome in it. I wish his character had more screen time and was like more menacing a little bit, but the whole like ending where he steals all his parents' furniture and then has to buy it back, basically negating the whole night of like, you know, profit from the prostitution ring he's running out of his house. It's just it's a good like, you know, businesses are going to rise and fall kind of thing. You know, the whole American dream.
And it's a good way to actually reset everything that happened.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, even though he ends up back at basically square one where the movie started, he's had this like massive, you know, wild experience, and like he's grown as a person. But like the consequences of all these actions aren't like they're not really they don't manifest, you know, because he's able to pull off all these crazy moves to avoid his house being like a total mess when his parents come home and the car is completely destroyed and all that stuff. But it's like a nice, clean and like satisfying way to circle back to like equilibrium, you know. Whereas like if they would have left him with like 50 grand in cash, it would have been like, okay, like he doesn't really need to like go back to like his old lifestyle or anything like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good full circle. Yeah, I really like this movie. You know, Paul Brickman wrote and directed it. He's like not really done anything except this movie. This is his claim to fame. Yeah, the writing's really good. The acting's really good. Overall, I think this is an excellent movie. I highly recommend it. Definitely should be on your list. Try and watch it. So, I've been talking to people that have been listening to the podcast, is the whole thing is like in an ideal world, in a perfect world, you watch the movie before and then you listen to the podcast and follow along with us. That's kind of the ideal world.
Yeah.
Definitely enjoy this movie. Again, it's on Paramount Plus at the moment. Really, really enjoyed it. And very classic 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. Great movie. Highly recommended by both of us, I think.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next week.